I woke up on December 2nd to find 3 HOA board members standing in my backyard with a flatbed truck, already halfway done loading my firewood pile onto it. The temperature in Lewiston, Idaho had dropped to 15 degrees overnight, and forecasts predicted it would stay below freezing for the next week. My neighbors and I relied on that firewood. Our subdivision, Ponderosa Ridge, was built in the late 1990s with dual heating systems, electric baseboard heaters as primary, and wood stoves as backup. Most of us used the wood stoves exclusively because electricity costs had skyrocketed. I had spent 2 months splitting and stacking 6 cords of seasoned oak and pine, enough to heat my home through the brutal Idaho winter. I ran outside in my slippers and thermal underwear, my breath coming out in white clouds. "What the hell are you doing?" The woman supervising the operation turned to face me with the kind of smile that probably looked warm to her, but came across as condescending to everyone else. Deborah Patterson, HOA president for the past 4 years, wore a puffy North Face jacket and held a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. "Good morning, Bradley," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "We are removing violations from your property. That's my firewood. I need that to heat my house." According to HOA Covenant Section 12.7, subsection C, no homeowner may store raw lumber, construction materials, or unsightly wood products visible from the street or neighboring properties. Your woodpile violates this regulation. I stared at her, my face going numb from more than just the cold. "That's firewood, not lumber. I've had that pile in the same spot for 3 years. The previous board was lax in enforcement. We are correcting that now. You received a violation notice 30 days ago. I never got any notice." Deborah flipped through papers on her clipboard. "It was sent to your mailing address on record. Not our problem if you do not check your mail." I did check my mail, every single day, but arguing that point while they were actively stealing my winter fuel supply seemed pointless. "Even if I got a notice, you cannot just take my property. That's theft. We have the authority to remove violations at the homeowner's expense if they are not corrected within the specified time frame. You will receive an invoice for removal and disposal costs." She nodded to the 2 men with her, Greg Hutchins and Mark DeLuca, board members who always voted however Deborah told them to. "Disposal. You are going to throw away perfectly good firewood in the middle of winter. That is not our concern. You should have complied with the covenant." My hands clenched into fists. "Let me buy it back from you then. Name your price. The wood has been declared a covenant violation and must be disposed of per HOA regulations. Now please step back. We have several more properties to address today." Several more properties. My stomach dropped. "Who else?" Deborah's smile widened. "That is board business." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You are stealing my property. I am documenting this." "Document away," Deborah said cheerfully. "We have legal authority per the covenants you signed when you purchased your home. If you interfere, we will call the police and have you removed from the premises for obstruction." I wanted to physically stop them, to stand in front of the truck, to do something. But she was right that they would call the cops and I would be the one in trouble. I called my lawyer instead, but got voicemail. It was Saturday morning. I left an urgent message and watched helplessly as they loaded the last of my firewood and drove away. The temperature inside my house had already dropped to 62 degrees. I turned on the electric baseboard heaters, heard them click and hum, and watched my Nest thermostat display the rising temperature. The electric bill would be astronomical, but what choice did I have by noon? I had talked to 8 neighbors. Deborah's crew had hit all of them, anyone with a visible woodpile. Tom Breslin 2 houses down, the Martinez family on Elk Trail, Old Walter Simmons, who was 83 and living on Social Security. 47 homes total had lost their firewood supply in a single morning. We gathered at Tom's house that afternoon. Crammed into his living room with the wood stove burning, he had kept a small supply in his garage that they had not found. 19 angry homeowners, all demanding answers. "She cannot do this," Sarah Martinez said, bouncing her infant daughter on her hip. "We have 3 kids. We cannot afford to heat this house on electricity." "She already did it," Tom said grimly. "Question is what we do about it." "Sue the HOA," someone suggested. "With what money? Legal fees would bankrupt most of us," Walter pointed out. I had been researching Idaho law on my phone. HOA has enforcement rights, but they have to be reasonable. Taking someone's heating source in winter could be argued as unconscionable, but we would need a lawyer to fight it, and that takes time we do not have. "What about the firewood?" "Where did they take it?" Sarah asked. "Deborah said disposal, but I bet she's stockpiling it somewhere. She's not stupid enough to just burn 6 cords of good oak." Tom leaned forward. "You think she's keeping it or selling it?" "Firewood's going for $300 a cord right now with this cold snap. She confiscated from 47 homes. Even if everyone only had 2 cords, that's almost $30,000 worth of wood." The room went quiet as everyone did the math. "That's theft," Walter said flatly. "It's conversion of property at minimum," I agreed, "but proving it requires finding where they took it." "My cousin works for waste management," Tom said slowly. "If they disposed of it legally, there would be a record. Let me make some calls." We agreed to regroup the next day. Everyone headed home to their cooling houses. The temperature that night dropped to 8 degrees, the coldest December in Lewiston in 40 years. My electric heaters ran constantly, struggling to keep the house at 65. I wore 2 sweaters and thermal pants to bed, piled every blanket I owned on top of me, and still woke up shivering at 3 in the morning. The next day was Sunday. Tom called me at 9. My cousin checked. No delivery of firewood to any waste facility in Lewiston, Clarkston, or Moscow in the past 48 hours. So where is it? That's the question. I spent the afternoon driving around, looking for that flatbed truck or any sign of where they might have stashed nearly 100 cords of firewood. Nothing. Lewiston was not a huge city, but it was big enough that they could have taken it anywhere. By Monday morning, my electric bill had jumped $50 in 3 days. My house was barely staying warm. I had to leave the oven on with the door open just to keep the kitchen habitable. That afternoon, Deborah sent out an email to the entire HOA. Subject line: Important updates regarding covenant compliance. The email was a masterpiece of bureaucratic doublespeak. She congratulated the board on successful enforcement actions and reminded all homeowners that compliance with community standards benefits everyone. She announced that due to increased operational costs, HOA dues would be rising by $40 per month starting January 1st. And she reminded everyone that the board had the authority to place liens on properties with outstanding violation fines. I had gotten an invoice that morning. Removal and disposal of my firewood, $1,200. Due within 30 days or a lien would be placed on my home, $1,200 for them to steal my property. I forwarded the email to Tom, Walter, and Sarah along with my invoice. Within an hour, we had a group text going with 23 homeowners, all of whom had received similar bills ranging from $800 to $1,500. "Emergency meeting tonight," Tom wrote. "My place, 7 p.m. 31 people showed up, cramming into every available space in Tom's house. People were angry now, not just frustrated, cold, broke, and angry. "They're extorting us," Jennifer Klein said. She taught 4th grade and lived alone, stretching her teacher salary to cover her mortgage. I do not have $1,500. None of us do, Tom said, especially not after what our electric bills are going to be. Walter raised a shaky hand. My heater's not keeping up. House was 58 degrees when I woke up this morning. Mine too, several people echoed. I had been thinking about this all day. The covenants give the HOA enforcement power, but they do not give unlimited power. Taking someone's heating source during a winter emergency could violate Idaho's implied warranty of habitability. Does that apply to homeowners or just renters? Someone asked. Good question. I do not know, but I think we have a stronger argument around the disposal issue. They claimed they were disposing of the wood, but they did not. That's fraud. We still cannot prove where they took it, Sarah pointed out. Then we find it. I looked around the room. We have 31 people here. Lewiston's not that big. They had to take it somewhere with space to store that much wood. We organize search teams, cover the whole area, and we find our property. And then what? Tom asked. Then we take it back and we file criminal charges for theft. The room erupted in discussion. Some people thought it was too risky, that we should just lawyer up and fight it properly. Others were desperate enough to try anything. We finally agreed to spend the next 2 days searching while also pooling money to consult with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. We divided Lewiston into sectors. Teams of 2 or 3 would drive around, looking for the Firewood or that flatbed truck. It was a long shot, but we were out of options. Tuesday morning, my thermostat read 59 degrees despite the electric heaters running all night. The cold was winning. I bundled up and met Tom and Walter at a gas station on Main Street. We took Tom's truck and started driving. We checked commercial storage facilities, abandoned properties, even the lots behind big hardware stores. Nothing. By Tuesday afternoon, we had covered our entire sector and came up empty. Other teams reported the same, but on Wednesday morning I got a text from Sarah Martinez. Found it. Old lumber yard off Bryden Avenue. Behind fence, but I could see the stacks through the gate. I met her there 20 minutes later. The old Clearwater lumber yard had been closed for 5 years, its main buildings empty and windows broken. But behind a chain-link fence, I could see it massive stacks of firewood, far more than could have come from just our neighborhood. That's my wood, I said, recognizing the way I had stacked it, a particular pattern my father had taught me. Mine too, Sarah said, pointing to a section with smaller split pieces. I stack it that way because it's easier to carry with the kids. A heavy-duty lock secured the gate. No one was around. We could cut the lock, Sarah said quietly. That's breaking and entering. They would have us arrested. They stole from us first. She was not wrong, but 2 wrongs would not help our case. Let me call my lawyer first. Now that we know where it is, we have proof. I had finally connected with an attorney named Robert Chen on Tuesday evening. He specialized in property disputes and had dealt with HOA cases before. I called him from the lumber yard and explained what we had found. Don't touch anything, he said immediately. Document everything. Photos, video, detailed notes. I'll file an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and property recovery. But Bradley, I have to be honest, this is going to be expensive, and it is not a guaranteed win. How expensive? Retainer of $5,000. Could go higher depending on how hard they fight. I closed my eyes. I did not have $5,000. What if we had 47 plaintiffs? Class action. That could work. Spreads the cost around, but it also complicates things. I would need to meet with everyone. We set up a meeting for that evening at the community center. I sent out messages to everyone on our list, and 39 people showed up. Robert Chen laid out our options. We could each file individual small claims suits, which would be cheaper but less effective. Or we could join together in a single lawsuit, split the costs, and have a much stronger case. People had questions, lots of questions. How long would it take? What were our chances? What if we lost? Here's the reality, Robert said. The HOA has a legal basis for enforcement actions, but they also have a duty to act reasonably. Confiscating heating sources during a winter emergency and then lying about disposal, that crosses the line into unconscionable conduct. I think we can win, but it will take time and there are no guarantees. We do not have time, Walter said, his voice strained. My house is barely habitable. I am an old man. I cannot take much more of this cold. Others murmured agreement. Several elderly residents were in the same situation. Homes built in the 90s were not well insulated by modern standards. The electric heaters could not keep up with temperatures in the single digits. There's another option, Tom said slowly. We go get our wood back tonight, right now, before they can move it or destroy evidence. That's illegal, Robert said sharply. Is it? It's our property. They stole it. You'd be breaking onto private property and taking something that they claim legal ownership of. You would be arrested. Not if we document everything first, I said, an idea forming. We take photos and video showing our wood is there. We file a police report for theft. Then we demand the police recover our stolen property. Robert considered this. It could work, but police are not going to prioritize a civil dispute between homeowners and an HOA. Even if elderly people are freezing, Sarah demanded. I'm just being realistic. Then what do we do? Jennifer Klein asked, her voice breaking. I am wearing 4 layers of clothing in my own home. I cannot afford my electric bill, and they want another $1,500 or they will take my house. How is any of this legal? The room fell silent. These were good people, working people, people who had bought homes and played by the rules and were now being punished for it. We contact the media, I said suddenly. HOA steals firewood from 47 homes during winter freeze, elderly residents freezing. That's a hell of a story. Tom nodded slowly. Local news would eat it up. And it puts pressure on everyone, the HOA, the police, maybe even the city council, Sarah added. Robert held up a hand. Media attention can be a double-edged sword, but in this case it might actually help. Public pressure could force a settlement. We voted. 37 people in favor of contacting media, 2 against. I volunteered to make the call since I had the most documentation. Thursday morning, I contacted every news outlet in Lewiston and the surrounding area. I sent detailed emails with photos, videos, copies of the invoices, and a list of affected homeowners willing to be interviewed. By Thursday afternoon, I had callbacks from 3 stations. Clue TV sent a reporter and camera crew to my house that evening. The reporter, Amanda Foster, was young but sharp. She interviewed me in my living room where you could see your breath despite the heaters running. She filmed the thermostat showing 57 degrees. She interviewed Walter, who showed her his medicine cabinet. He had heart problems, and his doctor had warned him about cold exposure. She interviewed Sarah and her 3 shivering kids. Then we took her to the lumber yard. The camera captured stack after stack of stolen firewood through the fence. I explained how we had documented our wood, how we could identify specific pieces by the way we had cut and stacked them. Have you contacted the police? Amanda asked. We filed a report yesterday. They said it was a civil matter and they could not get involved. Even with elderly residents in danger, apparently, yes. The story aired Friday evening on the 6 o'clock news. HOA freeze out. Dozens left without heat in Lewiston winter emergency. It went viral. By Saturday morning, we had been picked up by boys' stations, then by regional news networks. My phone would not stop ringing reporters, concerned citizens, people offering to donate firewood. The story hit Reddit and exploded. Someone started a GoFundMe to help us with legal costs. It raised $18,000 in 2 days. Deborah Patterson did not respond well to the attention. Saturday afternoon, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. It informed me that I was being fined an additional $5,000 for defamation of the HOA board and causing public harm to the community's reputation. If I did not publicly retract my statements and issue an apology within 72 hours, they would pursue legal action and place an immediate lien on my property. I forwarded it to Robert Chen, who actually laughed when he read it. "This is beautiful," he said. "They just handed us anti-SLAPP ammunition on a silver platter." Anti-what? Strategic lawsuit against public participation. Idaho has laws protecting people from lawsuits designed to silence them on matters of public concern. This letter is evidence of retaliation. We can use it. I also forwarded it to Amanda Foster, who did a follow-up story about the HOA attempting to silence homeowners. That story got even more attention than the first. By Monday, December 9th, we had been freezing for 7 days. My electric bill for a single week was $138. Walter ended up in the emergency room Sunday night with early signs of hypothermia. The hospital kept him overnight for observation. That was when things finally started moving. Monday morning, the Lewiston City Council held an emergency session to discuss the situation. Several council members had been flooded with constituent calls. The mayor gave a statement saying they were deeply concerned and were exploring options to assist affected homeowners. Monday afternoon, the Idaho Attorney General's office announced they were opening an investigation into HOA practices in Ponderosa Ridge. And Monday evening, the police finally showed up at the old lumber yard with a warrant. I got the call from Tom, who heard it from someone who lived near Bryden Avenue. 12 squad cars and 2 police vans. They cut the lock and went inside. What they found was worse than we thought. The police discovered not just our firewood, but firewood from 3 other subdivisions that Deborah had targeted. Over 200 cords total, worth approximately $60,000. They also found receipts and contracts showing that Deborah had been selling the confiscated wood to a supplier in Moscow, Idaho, who resold it at premium winter prices. She had pocketed nearly $38,000 over the past month alone. Deborah Patterson, Greg Hutchins, and Mark DeLuca were arrested Tuesday morning and charged with theft, fraud, and criminal conversion of property. The charges were enhanced because their actions had endangered vulnerable populations during a weather emergency. The arrests made national news. Tuesday afternoon, police released our firewood. They asked us to come identify and claim our property. Tom organized teams with trucks, and we spent the rest of the day hauling wood back to our homes. I loaded my truck 3 times, stacking my reclaimed oak and pine in the same spot in my backyard where it had been before. The temperature was 19 degrees, but I was sweating by the time I finished. That evening, I lit my wood stove for the first time in 8 days. The heat spread through my house like a blessing. Within an hour, the temperature had climbed to 72 degrees. I turned off the electric heaters and just stood there, warming my hands by the fire. Wednesday, the local news ran a feel-good follow-up story showing residents reunited with their firewood, elderly homeowners warm again, kids playing instead of shivering. We had won, but the legal consequences were just beginning. The emergency HOA meeting held Thursday night was packed. Over 100 homeowners showed up, filling the community center beyond capacity. With Deborah, Greg, and Mark under arrest, the two remaining board members, Linda Yashida and Frank Morrison, were left holding the bag. Linda opened the meeting with a shaky voice. "I want to start by saying that Frank and I had no knowledge of what Deborah was doing with the confiscated firewood. We were told it was being disposed of properly." "You still voted to confiscate it in the first place," someone shouted. "We were following covenant enforcement procedures. You stole our heating source in the middle of winter," Tom yelled. "People could have died." The meeting devolved into chaos. People demanding resignations, demanding refunds, demanding the entire HOA board be dissolved. Linda and Frank tried to maintain order but failed completely. Robert Chen, who had come to observe, finally stood up and got everyone's attention. "I understand you are all angry. You have every right to be. But right now, we need to focus on practical matters. The HOA board committed crimes, yes, but the HOA itself is a legal entity that owns common property and has financial obligations. If you dissolve it improperly, you could create problems for yourselves." That sobered people up a bit. "What do you suggest?" someone asked. "Emergency election. Remove the current board entirely. Elect new members who will operate transparently and in the community's actual interest. Then pursue civil remedies against Deborah, Greg, and Mark personally to recover damages." We voted that night to remove Linda and Frank immediately, even though they claimed innocence. New board members were nominated and elected on the spot: Tom Breslin as president, Sarah Martinez as treasurer, and 3 others from the affected homeowners. Their first official act was to void all the firewood violation fines and issue formal refunds to anyone who had already paid. Their second act was to hire Robert Chen to represent the HOA in a civil suit against the former board members for embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and damages. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Deborah, Greg, and Mark were arraigned in mid-December. Deborah's attorney tried to argue that she had acted within her authority as HOA president, but the evidence was overwhelming. The receipts showed clear personal enrichment. The false statements about disposal showed intent to deceive. The timing during a winter emergency showed reckless endangerment. Greg and Mark took plea deals in January, agreeing to testify against Deborah in exchange for reduced charges. They each got 6 months in county jail and restitution orders. Deborah refused to plea. Her trial was set for March. I attended every day of that trial. The prosecution laid out a detailed timeline of her scheme. She had started small back in October, confiscating Halloween decorations left up too long and reselling them at consignment shops. When that worked, she moved to bigger targets: patio furniture that violated color schemes, garden decorations deemed inappropriate, and finally, firewood. The firewood had been her biggest score. She had targeted properties strategically, choosing homeowners she thought were least likely to fight back: elderly residents, single mothers, people she perceived as too poor to hire lawyers. She had timed it for early December specifically, because firewood prices peaked during cold snaps. What made it worse was that she had known exactly how much damage she was causing. The prosecution presented emails between Deborah and Greg where she joked about freezing out the riffraff and teaching compliance through discomfort. She had called Walter Simmons a freeloading old man and suggested his health problems would solve themselves if he got cold enough. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Deborah was sentenced in April to 4 years in state prison, and ordered to pay full restitution, $68,000, to cover the value of stolen property, damages, and costs to all affected homeowners. Her assets were seized to cover it, including her home in Ponderosa Ridge. The civil case wrapped up around the same time. The court awarded our class action suit an additional $42,000 in punitive damages, which was distributed among the 47 households. I received about $900, enough to cover my inflated electric bills from those frozen days, and then some. By late April, life in Ponderosa Ridge had returned to something resembling normal. The new HOA board operated with actual transparency meeting minutes posted online, open forums for homeowner input, reasonable covenant enforcement that focused on genuine community concerns rather than petty power trips. Tom revised the covenant language around firewood storage, explicitly allowing it for residential heating purposes as long as it was neatly stacked and maintained. The revision passed with 93% approval from homeowners. Walter recovered fully from his hypothermia scare and became something of a neighborhood celebrity after his testimony at trial made national news. He started a community watch program to keep an eye on elderly residents during extreme weather. Sarah Martinez used her portion of the settlement to buy a more efficient wood stove and insulate her attic. Her kids helped her stack 2 cords of firewood in their backyard that fall, proud to be part of keeping their home warm. As for me, I spent that spring and summer cutting and splitting wood for the next winter. I ended up with 8 cords by October, more than I needed, but I had learned my lesson about being prepared. I also helped organize a community would bank donated firewood kept in common storage for any homeowner who ran short during winter. We collected 12 cords through donations and fundraising. December rolled around again, and when the temperature dropped into the teens, I sat by my wood stove with a cup of coffee, watching the flames dance. My house was warm. My neighbors were warm. And Deborah Patterson was sitting in a cell at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center, experiencing her own kind of cold comfort. The whole nightmare had lasted 6 freezing days in December, but the consequences rippled out for months. It taught our community a lot about the dangers of unchecked HOA power, about the importance of standing together, and about how quickly a little authority could corrupt someone who valued control over compassion. I still live in Ponderosa Ridge. My firewood pile sits in the same spot in my backyard, 6 cords of split oak and pine stacked in neat rows. Sometimes I walk past it and remember that December morning when I woke to find strangers stealing my winter fuel. I remember the fear and anger, the cold nights, Walter in the hospital, Sarah's kids shivering. But I also remember what came after, how neighbors became friends, became allies, how 31 people crammed into Tom's living room and decided to fight back, how a community found its voice and refused to be silenced. The news coverage died down eventually, as news coverage always does. We had our 15 minutes of viral fame, our moment as a cautionary tale about HOA overreach. But for those of us who lived through it, who spent those 6 days watching our breath fog in our own living rooms while someone profited from our suffering, the lessons lasted longer. I learned that legal does not always mean right, that signed covenants do not justify cruelty, that authorities need to be held accountable, and that sometimes the only way to get justice is to fight for it yourself. I also learned the value of preparation, of community, and of a good lawyer who returns calls promptly. The GoFundMe money that exceeded our legal costs was donated to a regional nonprofit that helps low-income homeowners with heating assistance. It seemed appropriate. We had gotten our firewood back, our heat restored, our justice served. Others were not as fortunate. Every December 2nd, some of us gather at Tom's place to mark the anniversary. We call it Firewood Freedom Day, which sounds ridiculous but feels right. We share a meal, swap stories about that crazy winter, update each other on our lives. Walter brings his famous apple pie. Sarah's kids, a year older each time, ask to hear the story again like it is a family legend. And we make sure our wood piles are stacked high and our neighbors are taken care of, because we remember what it felt like when someone with a clipboard and a power trip decided that rules mattered more than people. This past winter was mild by Idaho standards, barely dipping below zero a handful of times. My wood stove kept my house comfortable, my electric bill stayed reasonable, and nobody tried to steal my firewood. The Ponderosa Ridge HOA sends out a monthly newsletter now. Boring stuff about landscaping schedules and speed limit reminders. Tom writes a column called President's Corner, where he discusses upcoming maintenance projects and budget allocations with a level of detail that would make most people's eyes glaze over. It is exactly the kind of transparent, accountable, unexciting governance that an HOA should provide. Deborah's house sold last summer to a young couple with twins. They are nice people, completely unaware of the property's history until I mentioned it one day while helping them move furniture. They were horrified, then fascinated, then grateful that things had changed. I still have the invoice Deborah sent me, the one demanding $1,200 for removing my firewood. It is framed on my office wall, a reminder. Not of her specifically, but of what happens when people mistake authority for righteousness, when enforcement becomes extortion, when covenants are weaponized against the community they were supposed to protect. Some people think I am bitter for keeping it. I am not. I am grateful, actually. Grateful that it happened to people who could fight back, who had the resources and support to resist. Grateful that it happened when we could still stop it, before someone actually died from the cold. Grateful that the system, slow and imperfect as it was, eventually worked. Robert Chen still handles legal work for our HOA, reviewing contracts and making sure we operate within the law. His rates are reasonable. His advice is sound, and he never lets us forget that HOAs, like any organization, need checks and balances to function properly. The old lumber yard where our firewood was stashed got bought by a developer last fall. They are turning it into mixed-use retail and apartments, erasing the last physical evidence of Deborah's scheme. But the memory stays with everyone who lived through it. I think about those 6 days sometimes when I am splitting wood for the next winter. The rhythm of it is meditative: position the log, raise the maul, bring it down in a smooth arc, feel the wood split cleanly. Stack it properly so air flows through, letting it dry and season. Repeat a few hundred times until you have enough to last the cold months. There is something deeply satisfying about preparing this way, about knowing that you have taken care of a fundamental need through your own work. Fire is humanity's oldest technology, our first defense against the cold and dark. Deborah tried to take that from us, tried to leave us shivering and powerless. She failed. Not because the system protected us, it didn't. Not initially. Not because the police rushed to our defense, they didn't. Not because the HOA had internal safeguards against abuse, it clearly didn't. She failed because we refused to accept it. Because Tom and Walter and Sarah and 31 other people said no, this is wrong, and we are going to fight. Because we documented everything, told our story, and demanded accountability. Because Amanda Foster pointed a camera at our frozen living rooms and let the world see what was happening. The criminal justice system did its part eventually. Deborah served her time. She was released on parole last month after serving about 2.5 years. I heard she moved to Washington State, far from Ponderosa Ridge and her former life. I do not know what she does now, and I do not particularly care. She is no longer my problem. The civil damages helped make people whole financially, though no amount of money can compensate for the stress and suffering of those 6 days. Jennifer Klein used her settlement money to buy a backup generator. Walter upgraded his heating system entirely. Others paid down debt, fixed deferred maintenance, or just padded their emergency savings. I invested mine in a chainsaw and a log splitter, tools that let me process firewood more efficiently. I cut standing deadwood from a friend's property about 20 miles outside town, trees killed by bark beetles that would otherwise just rot. It is good wood, properly dried, and I have enough for the next 2 winters at least. The community wood bank I mentioned has become a real success. We collect donations year-round and distribute them to anyone who needs help. No questions asked. It is funded through voluntary HOA contributions and has provided heat to 17 families over the past 2 winters. Tom manages it with the kind of quiet competence that makes you wonder why he was not running things from the start. Ponderosa Ridge is a better place now than it was before Deborah's scheme, which is a strange thing to say about a community that had to suffer through a crisis to get there. But it is true. We know our neighbors now. We look out for each other. We participate in HOA meetings because we understand that governance matters, that who makes decisions and how they make them affects real lives in real ways. The covenants still exist. We need them for basic community standards, but they are enforced with common sense and compassion now. Someone's grass gets a little too long. A friendly reminder, maybe an offer to help if they are struggling. Holiday decorations stay up into January. Nobody cares. We save enforcement for things that actually matter: safety hazards, genuine nuisances, maintaining infrastructure. It turns out that when you treat people like adults and neighbors instead of subordinates to be controlled, communities function better. Who knew? I still heat primarily with wood. So do most of my neighbors. It is economical, it is reliable, and after what we went through, it feels like reclaiming something important. My electric heaters exist as backup now, exactly as they were designed to be used. This coming December will mark 4 years since Deborah's crew loaded my firewood onto that flatbed truck. 4 years since those 6 freezing days that changed everything. I will be ready for winter, same as always: firewood stacked, chimney cleaned, backup supplies stored. But I will also be ready in ways that have nothing to do with fuel or heat. I know my neighbors' names now, their situations, their vulnerabilities. I know who to call if something goes wrong. I know how to organize, how to document, how to fight back against abuse of power. I know that communities are stronger than any individual trying to control them, that justice is possible even when it is slow, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. My woodpile sits in my backyard, visible from the street, technically a violation of the old covenant language that Deborah used to justify her theft. But the new covenant explicitly allows it, language that we wrote and ratified together as a community. It is our wood, our heat, our homes, our rules, and if anyone ever tries to take it from us again, well, we know exactly what to do. The wood stove burns warm on cold nights, the same as it always has. The oak crackles and pops, releasing heat that spreads through my house in gentle waves. I sit nearby with a book or my laptop, comfortable and secure, listening to the winter wind howl outside. Deborah Patterson thought she could freeze us into compliance, that cold and fear and bureaucratic intimidation would make us submit. She was wrong about that, wrong about us, wrong about everything that mattered. The fire burns on and we stay warm, and justice delayed but not denied has been served. 4 years later, I can finally say it is over. The legal cases are closed, the restitution is paid, the wounds have healed. Life in Ponderosa Ridge has moved on to newer dramas and smaller concerns. But we have not forgotten, and we will not forget, because some lessons are too important to let fade. On cold December nights, when the temperature drops and the wood stove becomes the heart of my home, I think about those 6 days, and I think about what came after, and I am grateful. Grateful for the cold that tested us, grateful for the neighbors who stood together, grateful for the fire that kept us warm then and keeps me warm now. The firewood pile in my backyard is more than just fuel. It is a monument to resilience, a middle finger to petty tyranny, and a promise that in this community we take care of our own. And that is worth more than 6 cords of oak, more than any settlement check, more than any headline or viral moment. That is worth everything.